welcome back to Niche Tea, where we talk about drama happening in communities you may not be a part of. Last time we talked about the insane fallout in the VTuber community between VTuber Selen Tatsuki, now known as Doki Bird, and her former management agency, Nichi Sanji. Today we're going to recap a situation I am very late on in the book talk community, specifically related to the sprayed edges drama. The situation itself does seem to be fairly concluded, but I do think it's a really interesting conversation, so I still wanted to cover it. So what are sprayed edges? It's exactly what it sounds like when you realize they're talking about books when they say this. Painted or sprayed edges refers to an art technique where you take a book and literally paint on the edges of the book. Looking into this, I had no idea how beautiful some of these could be. Like, they are stunning. Now, I did distinguish painted or sprayed because when I say painted, I mean hand painted. Some artists will literally hand paint individual books for specific people. Sprayers, on the other hand, will do this in bulk with a bunch of the same book with the same design instead of customizing it for the customer, and that is relevant to the argument. What the business model ends up being for a lot of these sprayed edge small businesses is they will identify which books are very popular, ones that people who like artsy stuff are going to be into, etc., like hot new releases from different authors. They will go and buy out in bulk a bunch of them. They will then bulk spray them with a specific design. They make content around that in order to advertise it. They mark up the price of the book because they bought it new, they've added this art to it, and then they sell those books with the sprayed edges through their shops, either online or in person. This seems to be something that is growing in popularity. They're certainly very beautiful in a lot of cases, and a lot of readers really love them. So, what happened? A small business that does sprayed edges named Whimsy and Wonder, which is on TikTok, posted a video basically going after a specific author. Now, this is the part where I apologize to you guys because in being so late for this, I cannot for the life of me find this original video. I promise you I looked everywhere too. I downloaded threads for this. Still couldn't find it. So this summary is going off of the conversation that's happened since then, which include other people summarizing what was happening. But here's what I believe happened. An author whose books Whimsy and Wonder was doing bulk buying, spraying the edges, and then reselling at a markup for, emailed them directly to say, hey, I would appreciate if you would not sell my books or do this with my books, please. The accounts I've heard have said that the email from the author was very polite. It wasn't like rude or demanding or threatening legal action or anything. It was quite simply a request. I've also heard, though I can't find this post either, there might have been a post from Whimsy and Wonder beforehand that was like, hey, reach out to us if you're an author and you want to talk about this or something to those effects. So the author may not have even done this unprompted, though I don't think they're out of line to ask this in the first place, my opinion. This email then prompts Whimsy and Wonder to make a TikTok video blasting this author in particular for this request, I guess. I don't know exactly what she said, but I know that the gist of the conversation from this point forward was, do these people get to do what they want with the books once they buy the books? And that's the thing everyone's been swirling about pretty much ever since. Everyone pretty much agrees that Whimsy and Wonder did not handle this well in terms of that initial video and really shouldn't have brought this to the public. It's really not a good way to be managing your business, especially when your business relies so heavily on the immediate output from authors. Obviously, she doesn't have to work with them directly in order to just go buy their books, but still, since then, everything's been deleted, privated, whatever. Whimsy and Wonder deletes any negative comment on their page, and they seem to very much be trying to move on from this. So I think maybe they do understand this was not the best approach. But as I mentioned, this is a really big trend in the book community, and it has brought up a lot of really good conversation because there are a lot of authors who do have a problem with this. Now, when we talk about this, first up, legally, they're in the clear. You may have heard the term first sale doctrine mentioned a lot around this, and that basically means once you buy a thing, you are allowed to do with it what you want, and you are allowed to resell it. That's why there's no policing of garage sales or pawn shops or eBay. I've heard some arguments made about how you can't modify something materially and then resell it under the same name. So for example, if you buy Nike sneakers and resell them as is, you're allowed to do that. But if you change them a lot and then resell them as Nike, Nike can come after you for that. However, according to the lawyers I'm seeing who have jumped into this, which has been funny, that is more of a trademark issue. The problem is that you are selling something as Nike and you have changed what it is enough that it no longer represents what Nike is. In this case, it's not a trademark issue. It would be a copyright issue, and you're not selling the book as though it's yours. You're selling their book with art on it. All to say that from everything I've seen, the sprayed edges small businesses are all in the clear legally for what they're doing. But a lot of the points from authors aren't about the legality of it, they're about the ethics of it. Because these businesses, in a lot of cases, are marking these books up a lot. Like you're talking about like $70 for a hardcover book, none of which goes to the original author, despite it being based very, very heavily on their product, with no agreement in place with the authors themselves. The pro sprayed edges POV on this, in addition to it being a legal practice, is that they are buying these books. So the author is getting the sale for all the books that these guys go ahead and buy up front. They are then adding their value in artwork to the books, and they are allowed to then price that as appropriate. And asking them to charge less or asking them to give the authors a cut of that is further devaluing their artwork that they are adding to the book, which is what the upcharge is for. And they're not stealing customers from the authors because, again, they've already bought these books from the author, whether a customer buys it from the sprayed edges person who already bought it from the author or from the author directly, the author still got a sale. And they make the argument that if they had to give money back to each individual author for every book, in addition to their overhead and everything, that it would functionally kill their business. Arguments I've heard from the pro-author side of this include that in order for these businesses to do this in the first place, the art that they have to make, even though it is their art, it necessarily has to be based on the writing from the author. Like, it has to be relevant to that. Otherwise, it wouldn't make sense to put on the side. These aren't random images, right? They are based on that IP. And so again, even though it's legal, you are utilizing their IP to make this money. Then the biggest arguments really center on the fact that authors make very, very little per book sale as it is. And when these guys come in, they're doing like bulk wholesale orders from the cheapest places they possibly can that minimize that actual profit to the author as much as possible. So for example, in the case of Whimsy and Wonder, I'm hearing people say that she gets her books from a place called Ingram Sparks, which is a place where an author could literally get cents per sale. And then she's turning them around and selling them for $70. She's making way more per book than the actual author. And I'm seeing a lot of conversation that this is specifically bad for small authors. Like, nobody really cares if you're doing this with these like huge, widely distributed books. They are making money. So doing this to indie authors or smaller scale authors, even if they have very popular books, hurts them a lot more than it would for like J.K. Rowling, whatever. So then especially if an indie author comes to you and says, hey, please don't do this to my books, and you tell them to fuck off, it's not great. I'm really caught in this one. I've been thinking about it a lot. I understand arguments on both sides. And the cop-out answer that immediately comes to mind is I fucking hate capitalism. I think there is merit from the author's side to the argument that the sprayed edges folks should not be maximizing their profits in ways that minimize the profits of the actual authors. But it seems to have died down for now, though. Again, this is very popular. Again, the beautiful stuff. Truly, like, go check them out. Like, if you're somebody who collects books, I think it's something that could be very cool. Maybe just look into who you work with. And if you can prioritize ones that are able to work with authors directly, I think that would be beneficial to the entire system. But I'm very open to discussion and thoughts on this one. I still am noodling it in my head a bunch. Hello and welcome back to Niche Tea, where we talk about drama happening in communities you may not be a part of. Last time we talked about the sprayed edges drama happening over on Book Talk, which seems like it's going to be kind of an ongoing ethical conversation. So I'm interested to see where that goes. Today we're going to talk about drama in the bird watching community, which I've come to learn through researching this is also called birding, and that is amazing to me. I love verbing nouns. I think most people are pretty familiar with the idea of what bird watching or birding is. Folks who are part of this community will go out in search of specific birds just to see if they can literally see them. There's everywhere from very casual to very dedicated people who do this, and for the more dedicated side, they are looking to see as many different species of birds as possible. And there are a number of websites that the community uses for people to go in, establish a profile for themselves, and log the birds that they've seen with pictures, dates, etc., so they can keep a running tab of where they're at. But it's important to note that there's no like governing body of this group of folks, so there's no official verification process for this, etc. It's very much built on trust and knowing each other within the community, especially for the more serious birders. The event we're discussing today surrounds a breaking of a world record, which is more than 10,000 birds having been seen across the world. No one has done that prior to February of 2024. Now, for years, there already was a very well-established person within the birding community who was making it very clear that their intention was to break this particular milestone record. That person is a man by the name of Peter Kastner, who is very well known, again, within the community, very well established, very well respected. Also, coincidentally, a US diplomat. So that's interesting. Not only is he well established on all of these websites because he's been continuously logging his new watches as he sees every new bird for years and years and years, but even outside of these websites, if you go on YouTube and just look up his name, I was trying to find information on this current thing and the record, and there are so many different interviews, documentaries, news segments logged from years over the past decade onto YouTube, all about birding. So he's very well established. So what happened? I believe of June of last year, Peter posted that he had a plan for how he was going to be getting to 10,000 over the next year or so. So his plan was back half of 2024 to beat that record. He wanted to set it up such that when he did it, his friends and family would be with him. This would be a lifetime achievement. This was very important to him. And so he wanted to kind of take his time and figure it out. Then in October, I believe, of 2023, out of nowhere comes this other guy named Jason Mann. He shows up on one of these birding websites and logs out of nowhere nearly 10,000 bird sightings from the past number of years. Everyone is, of course, immediately confused. Like, what do you mean? What? You just had this yourself and you've never logged it anywhere? No one has any idea who you are? And he is trucking, adding more and more as days go on. So Peter sees this and is like, okay, fine, game on. I'm gonna beat you. Now again, there's no approval board, verification board for any of this in terms of the legitimacy of the lists that Jason has been putting out. So people are like, we really want to look through this. But for Peter's part, he's like, I'm going to take this man seriously. I'm going to assume that these are valid, and I'm just going to change my timeline accordingly and still beat him. So he moves up a bunch of stuff, and he gets to the point where he's literally one bird away. And coming out of that trip, he hears that Jason Mann is going to be making a trip very quickly to get his 10,000th as well. So he, Peter, moves up his next trip to immediately turn around and go and get his 10,000th. And then on February 9th, he announces his 10,000th bird. This bird was the orange-tufted spider hunter in the Philippines, for those interested. And right as he's going to make the announcement, he gets word that Jason Mann claimed that literally earlier that day, possibly like technically the previous day, he also caught his 10,000th. Again, the community is extremely skeptical, but there's no authority. So people are just going through his lists on their own still. So as far as Peter's concerned, he's just like, I'm going to celebrate the fact that this is a milestone for me. So one way or another, whether I was the first to do it or not, I'm very proud of myself and I want to thank all these people. He was very classy about it, in my opinion. Right around this time, an article is then posted congratulating Jason Mann for breaking the record. This is the only article I can find about this guy at all, which makes sense because he didn't exist in the birding community until 4 months ago. The article was posted on a website for a Colombian tour service called Mannequin Nature Tours. But the byline has it as written by Jason Mann. So like he wrote it congratulating himself and then I guess asked them if he could put it on their website because they've worked with him before. And it's been taken down now, but people claimed it also looked like it was AI generated, which, you know, if you can't write, you can't write. I kind of get that. But like the whole thing in its entirety is the part that I'm just like, why does this exist? Now, Jason announcing that he had broken this record instead of Peter kind of put a fire under a bunch of people who had been looking into his list. And there were concerns about the list. I don't know anything about birds. I'm going to be putting up screenshots of things people had questions about, but my understanding from what I'm reading from these people is that there are birds on there that have not been seen in decades, birds that were thought to have gone extinct. Like the types of stuff he's claiming that he has seen would have warranted reaching out to other people before now by saying, hey, I have found this, like scientists or other communities or the news. Assumedly coming out of this scrutiny, Jason Mann, who I literally wasn't sure actually existed as a human being, sent an email to Peter Kastner, basically conceding the record to him and saying that, yeah, some of them are sketchy in mine, and so I'm gonna let you have it, I guess. He also supposedly sent a similar email to the Mannequin Nature Tours team, basically explaining like, you should take this article down because I'm conceding for these reasons. The Mannequin Nature Tours team then puts out this insanely long statement that was kind of like, we worked with this guy and did tourism and travel stuff, and we work with bird watchers, so he showed us his list on these places, and we were kind of like, okay. So then we thought it could be good promotion, and like, we don't have anything to do with any fraud. Like, they were very concerned. It was really funny. I think they got a lot of flack for this as the only outlet to promote him as the winner. So they walk it back super hard. Peter is granted the milestone and has been very classy about this whole thing, what you would expect from a diplomat. I imagine he was literally seething on the inside, because who wouldn't be? As far as Jason goes, I haven't seen anything else related to which ones were illegitimate in his list. Are any still up in the air? Do we have like a solid list that we, I guess, believe? Has he actually since then hit 10,000, since he seems to be on this insane roll? And if not, where is he actually, and will he hit it? I don't know. I don't think anybody really cares. For my side, I just think like, if you were doing this for as long as it would take to be able to get that many. Like, when you look at Peter Kastner and you look at the reputation he has and how long this took for you to have done all of that and not told anyone anything is just extremely suspicious to me. So for me, with absolutely no proof at all, this is my opinion, I think Jason's full of shit. And I guess we'll see if he continues to exist in this space publicly for a number of years, and maybe literally he just never thought to load anything anywhere before now, or if he disappears now that he wasn't able to snake this accomplishment from Peter. Hello and welcome back to Niche Tea, where we talk about drama happening in communities you may not be a part of. Last time we talked about drama in the birdwatching community. Specifically, what I'm coming to understand is a situation of life imitating art. Today's topic is one I think a lot of you saw coming, and we're talking about the cosplay community, specifically the situation around Katsucon. Very quickly before I get into this, for those who have been asking that I put these on YouTube and Instagram, I am doing that now. They're literally just reposts. You can find the links in my bio. Now, before I get into today's topic, there are a couple things that I need to say. As a rule for this series, I avoid serious topics because I want it to be tea. And once we get into things that involve real harm, it is no longer tea. What we're talking about today does involve the discussion of heavier topics, and I want people to be aware of that. The reason that I am moving forward with including this in this series is because the primary focus of the video is not going to be on these events which allegedly happened. This video will touch upon alleged incidents of harm which took place supposedly at Katsucon. However, the primary focus of the video is the discourse after the fact. So all that to say, I want to give a trigger warning up front that there will be some heavier themes throughout this. However, no direct immediate acts are going to be discussed. And I want to reaffirm that I'm not changing my stance, and that generally, someone being accused of doing XYZ horrible thing is not something that I will be covering in this series as a rule. And finally, this is a very messy situation that involves a lot of different people with a lot of different personal accounts of different things. There's also a lot of question as to what information is accurate and what is not. That is a central part of this discussion. So because of that, I'm not, for the most part, naming people, tagging people, etc. I will say the name of the person who's at the center of this, and that's about it. I will show screenshots as I normally do of anything that's public. I may still censor some of them even. I have information from a whole bunch of different places. Some of them are public, some of them are people who DM'd me directly, etc. And I don't want to be sending hate to any specific parties. So I will just be very clear with you. Did I see something myself? Did I see people talking about this thing? Did someone contact me directly, or did I have a direct conversation with someone about it, etc.? And you can take that information and do with it as you like. I am not a member of the cosplay community. I speak with no level of authority. I am simply telling you what I have seen. And any opinions I express are simply based on what I have seen thus far. For some very quick background, Katsucon is an anime convention that takes place over 3 days, usually over President's Day weekend, in the DC metro area traditionally. Katsucon 2024 was the 16th through the 18th of February. As an anime convention, there was a significant amount of cosplay there. We've talked about cosplay before, but very simply put, it would be the art of dressing up as your favorite character from a movie or show. And it's very common at these conventions for people to dress up as characters from the shows relating to the material at the convention. So Katsucon is an anime convention, so you're gonna have a lot of anime and video game cosplays going on. There are tons of different ways to do cosplay. Most commonly, people just do it casually. They just show up at the convention and wear different outfits for no purpose other than because it is fun. We've discussed competitive cosplay in previous videos, and most anime conventions will have a cosplay contest, and there is even such a thing as professional cosplay, which we'll talk about a little bit more shortly. So, what happened? After this year's Katsucon had ended, a creator on TikTok who does cosplay content, who goes by the name of Ribbon, posted a series of videos which went very viral related to something they claim happened at the convention. Quick note that Ribbon's pronouns are he, him, so I will be referring to him as such. Warning that this is where the heavier topic discussion comes into play, but at a high level, Ribbon's initial videos allege that they had an issue with someone that they were mentoring who was a professional cosplayer who went to Katsucon, even though Ribbon himself did not go. He claims that this mentee of his arrived for a paid gig as a cosplayer at Katsucon, but was both drunk and high on substances throughout the weekend, exposed themselves multiple times in very public ways, including in the middle of someone else's photo shoot, was rude and belligerent to staff, and most seriously essayed multiple people, all of whom were men, specifically as a result of them being inebriated and wandering around and non-consensually interacting with people. Now, as I mentioned, this video went insane. Lots and lots of people engaging with it. Because of all the attention it was getting, a lot of questions were arising from people who were and were not at the convention. The primary of which simply being, who is this person? We want to protect ourselves and our communities, and we need to know who this is so that we can keep people informed. Ribbon claims that they deleted all of their social profiles since the convention because apparently their career was over anyway. He does eventually provide a username, though he is a little cagey about it at first, but no one can find anything under the username, which he claimed is because their socials are deleted. From here is where people start to really question why no one else is talking about this. Not a single other account has been posted from anyone on any platform that anyone can find. And similarly, this person that Ribbon is referring to doesn't have any digital footprint at all. Even if they deleted their socials, as especially a professional cosplayer, they should have something somewhere where we can say, oh, here's an example of them doing something for someone. And similarly, there are no victims coming forward that anyone can find. This is where things start to turn a bit. Ribbon's responses start to become very antagonistic to people. They respond to people saying that there is all of this evidence and lots of people are talking about it and there are victims coming forward, and basically calls everyone dumb who doesn't find it. He says he's posting lots of videos and he's posting proof and all this stuff, but that it keeps getting taken down. After a good amount of scrutiny, he does post a video showing screenshots of alleged conversations he had with people at Katsucon as this was happening. However, most people find them to be very suspicious. He either shows content without timestamps or timestamps without content. So like, here's a conversation with me and someone at the convention, but no timestamps. Or here's a call at this time that we had, and there's no way to know what that call was or who it was to or what it was about. He claims the reason that the emails and chats were so heavily censored and don't show timestamps is because someone led them to believe that you could dox people based on that. I've never personally heard that myself. I'm not sure where someone would hear that. I don't believe that that's true. At this point, things escalate again because other people within the cosplay community, both long-standing cosplayers in the community as well as professional cosplayers, start to make videos about Ribbon specifically. A broad summary of the criticism that I saw in those videos from those cosplayers include that Ribbon is allegedly not well known in the cosplay community despite claiming to be a veteran cosplayer, despite it being a very small community. Ribbon is allegedly a person who falls out with people easily and becomes very vitriolic about it. For this reason, people are allegedly scared to talk about Ribbon and their experiences with him and are only feeling comfortable doing so now because of all of the conversation around this. There is allegedly no evidence that Ribbon has ever been a professional cosplayer, despite claiming to be one for over 13 years. He did show in a video his pay stubs he claimed to be from professional cosplaying. However, other folks have claimed that that's VA benefits because he is a disabled veteran. He also claims to be a licensed therapist, but doesn't give any information around what that licensing is, so that has been called into question. In the middle of the videos that he's been posting relating to this and responding to people, he's also posted videos specifically about how to get into professional cosplay and his services around being a mentor. This has led the majority of people to believe that he made up or greatly exaggerated whatever this incident was for the express purpose of promoting himself, basically. In response to all of this, he has continued to say that this absolutely happened as described, that there are victims. He says that one victim came forward on Instagram. I have not personally been able to find that person. He claims he does have pictures and videos of this girl doing this stuff, but to post it would obviously be revenge porn, so he can't. He claims that the people pushing back at him are people who don't believe that male victims exist for SA, which I haven't personally seen any evidence of, and claims that's why the victims aren't coming forward. From this point forward, his behavior has gotten concerning. Despite saying he didn't want to dox initially, he then turned around and posted this alleged person's full name and workplace, and claimed a police report had been filed by one of the victims and that he was going to be sending it to their employer. However, someone else has claimed to have reached out to him on Instagram to get more information so that they could ban this person from future cons. And when Ribbon responded, they provided a bunch of photos of this person. The name in those photos match back to a person Ribbon went to high school with who does not appear to be involved in cosplay in any way. I have verified the pictures and name myself. Ribbon has also said multiple times that he's been writing a list of up to, I've heard, 300 names of people and their employers, and is going to try and send emails to their employers to get them fired. They've made direct threats of that nature against at least one cosplayer who made a video about them. They claim to be filing defamation lawsuits, and most recently they've claimed that some of their lashing out has been reactive. I am certainly not a psychologist. My understanding of reactive is that a necessary condition for that is that you be put into fight or flight, and flight is not an option. So I struggle to understand how that would work in an online capacity. I found one account of a person who does corroborate Ribbon's story, but says they only saw little things. At this point, people who claim to be con staff have said that they didn't hear about this. There still isn't any other account supporting Ribbon's story. Regardless of whether this happened or not, Ribbon's handling of this has been extremely concerning. Hello and welcome back to Niche Tea, where we talk about drama happening in communities you may not be a part of. Last time we talked about the very perplexing situation in the cosplay community coming out of Katsucon 2024. Today we're talking about something much lighter than that, and actually probably one of the most positive communities. I don't even know that I would call this drama, because there's just literally no negativity in it at all. We're talking about the fountain pen community today. It's so much fun looking into this. I'm tagging below a creator named Aiden Bernal, who has an entire account completely focused around his passion around pens and fountain pens. His video is the one I got tagged in the most that initially got me onto this story. I found a few other sources, but he has a very complete view of this as well, and his account is really interesting. So please go check him out. First, for some setup, I'm gonna assume most people know what a pen is. Odds are, even if you aren't super familiar with them, you have probably also seen a fountain pen at some point in your life. Fountain pens differ from ballpoint pens, the standard ones we use to write with, in a number of ways. Most notably, there is a big difference in the tips of the pens, right? One literally has a ball point, and the other one has this kind of pointed thing that's actually referred to as a nib. There are all different types of nibs. There are actually even roller nibs, and they pull ink out of the pen itself in a different way than ballpoint pens do. Fountain pens, I believe, also use water-based ink, where ballpoint pens use oil-based. Fountain pens are also far less likely to come disposable like ballpoint pens usually do. Instead, folks who use them will buy separate pots of ink and refill the fountain pen with different types of ink, so you can choose what ink you like and continue to use the pen that you've figured out is the best for you for whatever purpose you're using it for. Fountain pens are traditionally what you use for more artistic script style writing like calligraphy. And there are different types of fountain pens that have different benefits and different nibs that do different things. Aiden has a video pinned to the top of his page of him using a split nib on a fountain pen, and it is literally mesmerizing. Look at this shit. Look at this. It splits the thick. What? I have watched that video no fewer than 50 times. It is literally mesmerizing, and I am consistently blown away by the way the ink moves and spreads out without spreading out in the middle of the nib, if that makes sense. Now, the brand at the center of today's story sells both fountain pens and fountain pen accessories, as well as produces and releases ink. This brand is called Lamy. They're somewhat of a staple in the community from what I can see. One of their specific pens is called the Lamy Safari, and it seems to be kind of a staple option that most people have at least one of. It's very well rated. I see it in a lot of like top 5, top 10 lists for fountain pens. Now, because it's very popular and consumerism, it seems like basically every year, Lamy releases limited edition versions of both the Lamy Safari fountain pen itself, as well as associated ink colors that go along with those. So, what happened? In 2016, the Lamy Safari limited edition color for both pen and ink was called Dark Lilac, and that was one of the most beloved inks that apparently has ever come out. The ink being so well loved, combined with the fact that it was limited edition, means that by now, 8 years later, if you can find it somewhere, it's going for hundreds of dollars. Like, I found forum alerts for it showing up on eBay. It's holy grail status for the community. I found a number of different reasons why people like it so much, and that includes that its base color is very difficult to recreate, and it's like a very beautiful purple. It also has a gold sheen to it, which is very difficult to do with purple inks, is my understanding. And I've heard people call out that you can shade it from very, very light and clearly purple down to nearly black. It's so dark, and that's uncommon with purples, apparently. So it's very loved, it's very sought after. Well, recently, Lamy announced the 2024 Safari limited edition colors for 2 pens and 2 inks, one of which is a dark purple color reminiscent of 2016 Dark Lilac, which is named Violet Blackberry. People in the community are excited. They're like, oh, it's probably an homage or, something close to it because they know people liked it so much. This will be cool. But then some people noticed that in Europe, retailers who are stocking Lamy products are stocking the limited edition now, and the ink is not called Violet Blackberry, it's called Dark Lilac. And so people ask them and are like, is this the same as Violet Blackberry? And they're just calling it Dark Lilac in the EU for some reason. And the retailers come back and are like, no, Violet Blackberry is unique and special to just the US, and the EU is getting Dark Lilac. And then people think, okay, well, maybe they're also then adding Dark Lilac to the regular line. Aiden points out in his video that Lamy has done this before. They did it with a particular turquoise color that started out as special edition and then was liked enough that they added it to the standard release line. So then people reach out to the head of sales for Lamy in the US to get more clarification. The head of US sales responds, confirming that Dark Lilac is a permanent new addition to their ink line. And most importantly, he confirms that the Dark Lilac formulation that's coming out now in 2024 is the exact same as the formulation from 2016 that was so beloved. He also confirms that Violet Blackberry is a completely different color for the special edition for 2024 release. However, he contradicts what we've heard from the EU retailers in saying that it is actually a global release. It's not limited to the US. Now, this is the part where I thought people were going to be mad, because I thought it was going to be a situation where there was a very big market for this very limited edition Dark Lilac, and their market prices were going to be screwed over by the fact that there was a new 2024 release, and it basically was just going to make it available to everyone. It's going to bring down the price. That hasn't happened at all. Literally everyone was just happy to have more of the Dark Lilac. Y'all are so healthy. But by this point, people have started receiving their Violet Blackberry and 2024 Dark Lilac, and they are comparing them to each other and to 2016 Dark Lilac, and they are not the same. The most noticeable difference seems to be the sheen. As I had mentioned, that 2016 Dark Lilac has a gold sheen to it. The 2024 is very green, like very green. Strong Marvel villain energy going on with 2024 Dark Lilac. The base color for 2024 Dark Lilac is also noticeably pinker than the 2016. I actually think the Violet Blackberry looks closer to the 2016 Dark Lilac than the 2024 Dark Lilac does, but that's just me. But truthfully, neither of the new releases have that very, very rich purple base that the 2016 does. Then, literally like 4 days ago, someone gets final confirmation from a contact at Lamy in Germany, where the ink is actually made, that while they did try to 100% exactly replicate 2016 Dark Lilac in the 2024 reproduction, there's a specific red dye that they used in 2016, which is no longer available, and so they weren't able to 100% replicate it, which explains the differences people were seeing and solidifies 2016 Dark Lilac as the holy grail ink that it always has been. Again, though, people were bummed for sure, but the whole community that I could see was very understanding. Usually when you have a community that is this intricately analyzing every part of the thing that they're into, you get a lot more emotional reactions to this type of stuff. But the most I saw were what I thought were pretty respectful criticisms of the marketing strategy. Like, you should not have had your retailers being the one leading the charge for this release, knowing how important this was, you know, for a lot of people, especially people who may have missed the original Dark Lilac. But that I can see, nobody's raging, nobody's calling for a boycott, nothing crazy like that. People are literally like, yeah, this wasn't the cleanest thing, but we understand. We know you weren't like intentionally trying to deceive us or anything. So let me just say, I am so proud of you guys. Other fandoms, please take note. Sometimes people try their best and shit just happens. Hello and welcome back to Niche Tea, where we talk about drama happening in communities you may not be a part of. Last time we talked about the most respectful frenzy I've ever investigated in the fountain pen community surrounding the 2024 potential re-release of the Dark Lilac ink from 2016. Today we're going to talk about something that is majorly affecting the fanfiction community, and that is fanfic binding. To start off, what is fanfiction? As the name implies, fanfiction is when a fan takes a work of fiction that already exists and writes their own story utilizing that IP in some way. Predominantly, it's using the characters either in their existing world, or it could be out of the world, or it could be a whole other host of changes, but it's about those characters for the most part. Very much the same as you'll see with fan art, where fans will make their own artistic representation of characters that they love from their specific IP of choice. Fanfiction is the exact same thing, just making their own stories. Millions of people read fanfiction, even if they're not writing it. It's a really fun way to continue to engage with and explore an IP when you're done all of the official stuff. There are a bunch of sites where you can post your own fan fiction or read others. The biggest ones right now, I would say, were Wattpad and Archive of Our Own. And the cool thing about them is that these are literally set up to be archives, so you can search by author, you can search by particular pairings, because a lot of these Fanfictions are around different romantic explorations of particular characters in series. You can search by what type of content you like. You can search by how well reviewed they are, all of this stuff, and they're obviously free websites. Fanfiction acts as a great creative and emotional outlet for a lot of people, both writers and readers. It's a free source of fun and creative practice for those who want to be writers. And I think it's worth mentioning that, you've heard a lot of jokes about the type of content you can find on some of these sites. When you're a teenager, there is something to be said about the value of having a free and safe place where you can explore different things about yourself in a private way. So, what happened? Something that's always been understood as a default about fanfiction is that it is derivative works, meaning that no matter how good your story is, no matter how much people might like it, you are making a story utilizing someone else's intellectual property, and therefore you cannot profit off of it. This is why fanfiction is free. It's free by necessity. However, over the last few months, there has been a rising trend of printing out, binding, and selling fanfiction, predominantly on places like Etsy and eBay. If you search fanfiction, you will find it. Mostly for this very specific Harry Potter fic called Manacled that's about Draco and Hermione in this horrifically angsty alternate universe situation. Don't read that if you want to be happy. My friend explained it to me because she said she read it and she loves it, and apparently it is beloved, and if you love it, great. It's gonna be a no for me. It sounds emotionally devastating. But more to the point, this is illegal. Definitively not even a question illegal. And the people selling it aren't even the people that wrote it. It'd be like if I went on to AO3, picked fics that I liked, downloaded, printed, bound, and then sold them. I'm profiting off of someone else's IP and someone else's story at the same time. So ethically, legally, all of that, you are absolutely in the red. And if that's all it was, these sellers doing out-of-pocket shit, that would be one thing. But the problem is this doesn't just put these sellers in the line of fire, it puts the fic writers in the line of fire too, even though they haven't actually tried to profit from it because they're the ones that wrote it. They are still open to litigation from the original copyright holder. And fanfic writers are freaking the fuck out, as they should. I would too. Writers have been coming out left and right saying they are pulling their works down from websites where people have historically been able to access them for free because they're terrified that they're going to be put in a situation where they are being hit with litigation for something that they didn't even do. And the reality is these platforms that are allowing these sales to go on, like eBay and Etsy, as long as they're not doing anything to control it on their end, this is going to seriously impact what the fanfic world looks like going forward. Because until that's handled, every author is going to have to weigh how much risk they want to put themselves in. So if you care about fanfiction, here are the things to know. 1, go and report anytime you see any listing for a bound fanfic anywhere. Report the listing, report the seller, report anything related to it. We have to stop this as much as possible. And if you're feeling extra spicy, continuing to put pressure on these platforms to make a more blanket system to prevent this from going up will be helpful. 2 is to socialize and share resources that do exist about how to bind your own fanfic. Unfortunately, it is also illegal to print your own fanfic and then give it to somebody and have them bind it, because literally if they profit off of their services, anything other than materials, they are profiting off of that original copyright holder's IP. So literally the only legal way to get bound fanfiction would be to print it at home. You can't print it somewhere else, or they are profiting off of the IP. And then either take it to someone who is a binder who does it as a hobby and will do it for just the cost of materials and not their services, or to do it yourself. And the good news is there are resources out there who can help you. I'm going to put screenshots here of any resources I was able to find. I've already found a few, but in case I'm able to find any more, I will be adding them here also. Please socialize these as much as possible for those who are interested. The more we give people other options, the less likely they are to consider buying it illegally. I totally understand the desire to have a bound copy of your favorite fan fiction. I've got some really intense ones from when I was younger that I would love to have physical copies of. We just got to make sure we do it the right way. And lastly, let's just continue to socialize this message very heavily that this is not a thing we accept. Do not bully or harass anyone, okay? But it is very easy to just make it generally clear where you stand on the issue, to not celebrate or support when you see someone buy one. Again, don't give them hate, just say, this isn't a thing I support. And do support authors who are pulling their fanfiction down for this reason. I'm starting to see comments that authors are getting flack for not wanting to put their works up any longer because people are attached to the works and are upset they're no longer available. You have to understand and support where they are coming from. They are protecting themselves. I would do the same. It is something they need to do. I personally think it's ridiculous that this is a charge we need to be taking on when it's Etsy and eBay allowing this to happen in the first place. They have very thorough systems in place to be able to pull down listings when they meet certain criteria that aren't allowed. There is no reason that they can't update them to get on top of this more quickly. And I do imagine eventually, fingers crossed, they're going to run into problems with this as well if they can't get it under control. But until then, don't be surprised if you can't find a fanfiction that you've always liked or if production of fanfiction slows down. Hopefully it gets resolved soon because this sucks. Hello and welcome back to Niche Tea, where we talk about drama happening in communities you may not be a part of. Last time we talked about the growing problem within the fanfic community of people coming in to print, bind, and sell very popular fanfiction, which is illegal. One thing I wanted to clarify about that story is that the people who are doing the selling, my understanding is they are not people who have been known as high-profile binders. So there are people who do bind fan fiction for themselves or for their friends as a hobby and not for profit. They're not the people doing this. It's a separate group of people who are coming in, having this done, and then looking to make a profit off of it. Today we're moving over to the steampunk community, and we're talking about this.
Everyone, please speak! No! May I please speak?
What are you?
Take your hand off. Oh, yeah, no. Your hand off your or I will lay you the fuck out.
I got tagged in that video so many times. And at first I wasn't able to find virtually anything. And that's why it's taken so long to get to a point where I can film this, because I've spent probably the last week trying to connect with as many people as humanly possible who were directly involved and have some sort of account to give. This is the first time I had to go to people like on Facebook and be like, hello, I am the niche tea lady. Please tell me your story. So that video was recorded on the third day of the Wicked World's Fair, which is an event that took place in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania on February 23rd through 25th. You can think of the Wicked World's Fair as a minor convention for the area. The event was held in a hotel in their event spaces. It was marketed as an event where people could buy tickets and come by on one or multiple days to shop at a whole bunch of local vendors that they had procured to show up for the event. They'd hired a whole host of local bands to perform. I believe standard tickets also included access to a certain number of more standard convention events, such as like panel discussions. But then in addition to that, there were a number of like VIP events that you could purchase additional tickets to on top of your standard convention ticket. As I mentioned before, this was predominantly marketed as a steampunk event. Steampunk, if you're not familiar, is a subgenre of sci-fi. It's a futuristic genre, but one that imagines a future where both the aesthetic and technology of the time is based entirely on early 1900s. So you get this really cool combination aesthetically of a futuristic depiction of what steam technology could have become if it weren't taken over by other forms, combined with like really neat old school fashion. Picture Downton Abbey, but like with a lot more goggles and gears incorporated into everything. The event did look to be broader than just steampunk. There was definitely a lot of like alt, spooky, goth, witchy vibes, weird nerd, outcast kind of stuff. All of that seemed to be very welcome. In theory, very cool. So how did we go from that to grown man yelling on the floor and grown woman pulling a miwa at a whole crowd of people? It all starts with the man in the Dr. Pepper shirt. This man is named Jeff Mock, and he's the person who put on this event. This is also something he does. He puts on events. He has a webpage called Jeff Mock Events, and he claims to have done tons of these successfully throughout his career. But clearly something went wrong this time, because this video was filmed during a vendor called meeting while the event was still going on, so the vendors could confront Jeff directly about what a complete shit show they felt that event had been. And there's a whole host of problems that they're alleging. The biggest by far being that Jeff massively oversold the event to vendors. According to one of his vendor coordinators, the space that they booked could hold about 60 to 65 vendors, and he booked more than 80. And I found a post from him on Facebook saying that they had 113. Then multiple people have said that when they showed up on Thursday night to set up so that things would be ready to go on Friday for the start of the event, Jeff was the person trying to put people in places. He had no idea where he wanted people. He didn't have like a chart already set out so that he could just tell people where to go. They were left waiting for hours while Jeff tried to set each person up in a place one by one. A ton of people say that they didn't get the place that they paid for, like they maybe paid more money to be in the main ballroom, but then a ton of them were put somewhere else. Tons of people have said they did not get the size space that they originally paid for. So like if they paid for a 10 by 10 space, they'd get like a 6-foot table. As they ran out of room, they just started cramming vendors any place they could find space. People were put right next to and in front of bars and stages. People were put in hallways and were just kind of left to figure it out themselves to allow the traffic to continue to pass through. Somebody was put in a closet. And then finally, people were eventually just literally turned away. People who had paid for rooms at this hotel for this convention so that they could vend. Or in some cases were told that they could only do room vending which has a whole other host of complications that go along with it. And because it was so cramped, vendors who had specific requirements for their vending space ended up having to leave. For example, a tattoo artist who was supposed to be there. On top of that, there are a lot of accounts that the hotel that this took place in was chosen because it was cheap. And the reason that it was cheap is because the owner wasn't fixing it up because I think he wants to demolish it. Allegedly, I haven't heard any statement from the owner themselves, but there are multiple accounts and pictures that at least one vendor had the ceiling collapse on top of their vending space, which was also leaking a bunch of water onto her stuff, but that really concerns me from a mold standpoint. And then the final nail in the coffin for a lot of these guys was that he allegedly claims that there would be thousands of people coming and it would be really worth it for their businesses for them to buy into this event. But again, according to that vending coordinator, there were actually more like a couple hundred for the whole weekend. And a lot of the business done was actually just vendors themselves supporting each other. And according to these vendors, as they're running into all these problems throughout the weekend, they cannot find Jeff, or if they can find him, they can't keep him in one place for very long because on Sunday during the event, he was planning to get married. So all of his time was being focused on that. He mentions that in the video, actually, the long version of it, like 5 hours after that video was taken, he got married in that hotel. In the event space, just to be clear. So the video we all saw was the come to Jesus meeting between the vendors and Jeff on the third day where they were confronting him about all of these problems and asking for refunds. Jeff had allegedly told everyone that he was going to be able to give them refunds, but that he didn't have the money immediately available. Money flow from Jeff had been a problem the whole weekend, beyond the vendor stuff too. Multiple people account for the fact that Jeff was unable to pay the sound equipment people who were setting up in the main ballroom where most of the vendors were. So they just left and there was no music, entertainment, anything in the main ballroom, and anybody who was scheduled to be in there just left and didn't perform. And a number of those VIP events that I mentioned earlier that people had to pay extra to go to did not happen the way they were supposed to or were just canceled. For example, one of those was an absinthe tasting, and it was literally like the bar's absinthe, like one bottle, and people just drank that one bottle of absinthe. Oh, I forgot food. The hotel wasn't able to provide food for some reason, and Jeff didn't know about that until the day of, and so he marketed this one food truck was there. Like the whole time, maybe 2 food trucks, that was it. All right, I have to move to the aftermath or I'm gonna run out of time. That I'm aware of, no one has gotten a refund. Jeff denied people refunds through Eventbrite. Now I believe he's claiming that someone else took over the event and they're the ones who are gonna have to give them refunds. Jeff has pointed to everyone but himself for every single thing here. He is taking zero responsibility for any of it. It's the vendor coordinator's fault, even though he allegedly claimed to have fired them before the event. It's Eventbrite's fault, even though he then claims that he's worked with them for 20 years and it's been fine. It's the Jeff Mock haters' fault for making people distrust him in the first place. And that's where this kind of seals itself for me, because when you look into it, this man has a history, both a business history and a personal history. Personal stuff, I'm not going to focus on in this for a number of reasons. I'm going to say up front, because I know it's going to come up, the woman that he married is significantly younger than him. She's like 21 years old. She and he are both adults. That's all I'm going to say about that. But on the business side, this isn't the first event of his that has gotten fucked up. And it was bad enough to the point that vendors have come forward who have worked with him on previous events and said, we warned you guys not to do this. So this is what happens when you work with this man. We told you. That's a hell of a reputation to have if you haven't done anything wrong. I mean, I've literally heard the phrase, he was run out of New Jersey, multiple times. But a lot of the vendors that went to this event didn't know who Jeff Mock was. This dude basically has lore, it goes back so far, and it is overwhelmingly bad. But he does seem to know how to build very strong loyalty with specific people. The woman with the sword in the video seems to be one of them. I'm not going to talk about her for a number of reasons, but I will say that I've heard nothing but good things about her, even from people who truly hate this man, Jeff Mock. And I'll say for myself, when I watch that video, it looks like she's making a very bad decision as a gut reaction and then immediately de-escalated from there. She should not have done it, but based on what I've heard, I'm like, okay. I will say personally, from what I've seen in the way that he talks to these people in the video, he doesn't take responsibility for anything. I'm going to show some screenshots of a personal conversation between him and a supposed friend after he thought they were vague booking about him. And you can see how incredibly dysregulated this man is emotionally. I do not think he needs to be in charge of anything. As of now, it does look like there are other events that could be his that will be happening in the Northeast area over the coming months. Please look into any of these and make sure he's not associated before you attend them as a vendor or an attendee. It's hard enough to be a small business without people like this making your life harder and making you lose money. Hello and welcome back to Niche Tea, where we talk about drama happening in communities you may not be a part of. Last time we talked about what people were referring to in the comments as the DashCon of the steampunk community, which was the Wicked World's Fair that took place in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Today we're going to talk about a topic that's been brewing in the Seaglass collector community. Starting from the top, Seaglass refers to glass which has one way or another ended up in the ocean, and over a long time, we're talking decades, it gets worn down by the ocean itself to the point where it takes on a very smooth and frosted look. Seaglass can be found in beaches all over the world, though there are some beaches that are more likely to have seaglass than others. Some beaches actually have so much of it that they're referred to as glass beaches themselves and are tourist destinations for you to come and check out. And there is a specific community of people who very much enjoy going out and seeing what seaglass they can find at various beaches for collection purposes. Like most collectibles, everybody has their own reasons for going into it. A lot of people just like the hunt of it. A lot of people just aesthetically really enjoy seaglass and like to have it. There's a whole industry for seaglass jewelry, and a lot of people will go out and hunt it specifically to turn it into jewelry themselves, either to sell or to collect. It's a pastime a lot of people take part in and really enjoy. So, what happened? This particular issue isn't something that's new, but it's something that's been getting a little bit more media attention recently, and it's caused me to deep dive into this and learn a bit more about it. I had mentioned before that seaglass takes a really long time in order to be fully cooked, as they would say. A piece of glass that goes into the ocean isn't going to be ripe and ready to pull out a year later. So most of the glass that people are finding are from like early to mid 19th century. And for some people who collect, that is the main driver of what they want. They love that the glass that they're getting, they know has some sort of historical significance to it. As you move closer and closer into modern times, there are more and more laws against dumping trash in the ocean, right? Which is obviously a good thing, and further supports the fact that if you were to find something glass from the ocean, that glass would be from before when those laws were put in place, making it very, very old in most cases. However, there is a contingent of the seaglass collecting community who thinks that it is their job to help further the production of seaglass by continuing to do something called seeding. Seaglass seeding is the practice of intentionally placing glass or pieces of glass either on the shore or like right offshore with the intention of adding back into the seaglass ecosystem, so it is a continuing cycle. And this is a hotly contested practice within the seaglass collecting community. Seaglass collectors who are pro-seeding cite a number of different reasons they think it is beneficial. Most simply because, as I mentioned before, the laws we currently have in place against ocean dumping will prevent it from continuing to be made. So there is a limited supply if we don't do this. That combined with the fact that more and more people are getting interested in seaglass every year, there will be a continuingly and increasingly dwindling supply. And it would functionally be something which would be impossible to do over time. Now, obviously, despite these laws, glass makes its way into the ocean, right? The pro-glass seeding side argues that even in those situations where glass does find its way into the ocean, it's not as likely to create seaglass as it is to be destroyed nowadays because of the fact that we use much thinner glass for the production of things like bottles and glasses than we used to. So it's not nearly as likely to hold up in the ocean. So it's important to put actually thick pieces of glass into the ocean to continue to create this new sea glass. As this practice started to get bigger, there became a very big rift within the community about this, and it's predominantly happening on Facebook. But it's getting contentious to the point where there are people literally splitting off into different groups because they are either for or against. The folks who are against this are worried that it's taking the magic out of it and also that it's unsafe. The glass you would need to put out needs to be done in small chunks, which means you're sharding glass and then putting it on a beach or like right in the shoreline. That creates a huge hazard for people who go to beach, especially children. And because so much of it is new, you're losing that historical significance that made a lot of it really special. For example, red sea glass is really hard to find because it wasn't historically used really at all. But if you start seeding a bunch of red glass that we've produced more recently, this is less of an issue. Another really big one is marbles. Marbles used to be like a holy grail once in a lifetime type of find. They were used in very specific instances, like old school bottles for drinks would have them sometimes as the seal, or literally from children playing the game marbles, where you use your own marble to shoot at your opponents, and kids would play those at the beach. But even so, they were very, very rare. But a really popular thing in the seeding community to use are literal marbles that have been made in the last couple of decades. One sea glass collector saw somebody post that they found 40 marbles in one day in one of the Facebook groups and got so mad because he knew that they were all seeded that he like broke away and made his own own like purist Facebook group for it. And again, this is a process that takes decades. It's not something you can just turn around and reap the benefits of in 5 years, right? But in the meantime, you are literally littering the thing we know we don't want to do and made laws to stop. The pro-seeding response to that is that the whole point of using marbles, and also they like to use those like flat, more round rocks that get used in like vases and stuff for decorative purposes, is because they don't hurt people. Also, due to their porosity and a few other factors, and the fact that they're already kind of pre-smooth, they're able to tumble in the ocean much faster and also get that frosted look way faster than the older stuff does. So they really can reap the benefits of it, and especially in a market where Seaglass jewelry, as I mentioned, is getting really popular. And from their perspective, while yes, it is technically littering, glass is a naturally occurring substance. It's not like plastics. It doesn't break down the same way. It doesn't cause the same issues that like other types of garbage in the ocean does, right? Sand becomes glass. So from their mind, it's not nearly the same level of impact, and there's a significant benefit. That's what they say. The pro-seeders also argue that the anti-seeders are getting very zealous about the concept in general. For example, the pro-seeders are saying that if somebody makes a post saying, oh, I was out seeding and I found uncooked glass, which is glass that's like hasn't been out long enough, and they move it further down the beach, maybe to like get away from other people and throw it back, that will count from the anti-seeders point of view as seeding, and they'll give those people hate for doing that. It's gotten to the point where most major groups avoid talking about it in general, or even just have rules flat out saying we don't talk about it because it's so contentious. There is an International Seaglass Association, and while they do not have an official stance on it, according to the Boston Globe, who interviewed the organization's president, it is highly discouraged because they believe that there's plenty of glass in the ocean already, and it will continue to be made throughout natural ways. You don't need to intentionally do this. The anti-seeders also seem to be seen by the larger community of Seaglass collectors, including the ones who are fairly neutral on the topic of seeding, just don't really engage, as being kind of like haughty and puritanical about the whole thing. They tend to be apparently very secretive about where they find really good sea glass. Like they do not want other people to go where they go. They don't want people to know their secrets, stuff like that. It seems to me like there's a big source of pride for some people there, and so they're gatekeeping. And it seems to me at least, irrespective of the actual arguments for and against seeding, the people who are like big proponents of anti-seeding are more old school people who are kind of gatekeepy about the whole thing, whereas they're more newer people on the neutral and pro seeding side. It's a really interesting conversation. From my perspective, it's hard to argue with, hey, don't litter. But I also say that as somebody who admittedly has no interest in sea glass or find any personal value in it, and if it disappeared, it wouldn't bother me. And I can understand how if it was important to you, it would be important to you to also understand the best possible way to continue the practice of creating and the ability for a collection of sea glass with the most minimal possible harm, which is truly what I think the pro-seeders are trying to do. I just don't know enough about the ocean myself to know if they really are doing it in a way that won't have a negative impact on marine life and the marine ecosystem. We'd be very interested to understand what anybody who works in the ocean, around the ocean, thinks of this. Hello and welcome back to Niche Tea, where we talk about drama happening in communities you may not be a part of. Last time we talked about the ongoing debate in the sea glass collecting community about the practice of seeding glass into the ocean. Today it's my turn. Talking about my niche. Talking about Pokemon Go. I have been playing Pokemon Go since 2016. I have 2 accounts. My baby account has its own dedicated phone. I am deep in it. I'll add my friend code somewhere around here if anybody would like to friend up with me in game if you play. Main is pretty close to max friends, but baby needs all the friends. Baby is grinding that XP. Please help baby. For Maine specifically, if you live in an area that is considered icy snow, please DM me. Please help me. Now, despite the fact that I'm very well versed in the Pokemon Go universe, I am 0% versed in the Pokemon Go content creator verse, and that's where today's story takes place. So let's start at the top. Pokemon Go is a mobile freemium game based on the titular series of Pokemon. You play as a trainer collecting Pokemon, doing raids, doing stuff with friends, all kinds of stuff. The really cool thing about the game, and part of the reason why I still like it, is that you are personally tied to the location of your phone. You cannot move in game. You have to move and be holding your phone, and your character will move. It actually looks basically like Google Maps in the game. So I always know where I am. Like if I'm biking or something, I can just look at Pokemon Go as I go, and I'll have directions the same way I would on Google Maps. I've personally really enjoyed the game from like making sure I get out of of the house during the day perspective because I do work from home. And the in-person events they do are really fun to do with friends if you have friends that play. So here's the background that's relevant for today's story specifically. When you catch a Pokemon in-game, it has a whole bunch of different potential stats that are randomized. This includes what level it is when you catch it. It also includes a thing called IVs, which are basically its stats. It has an attack stat, a defense stat, and an HP stat, how many health points it has. Now, level doesn't really matter because you can change the level by powering it up, and that's something that you can do organically within the game. But the stats are fixed once it gets inside your collection. Whatever it has at that point, it's going to have. The best possible Pokemon that you can get is one that has 15 attack, 15 defense, 15 HP. These are commonly referred to as hundos or perfects. Hundos are very hard to obtain. There are ways you can up the chances of getting one, such as particular trade types with other individuals in the game. However, even the best possible odds are just under 1.6% chance of getting a hundo. Another type of Pokemon that are very highly sought after in game are what are called shinies. Shinies are quite literally the exact same Pokemon, just a different special color that happens sometimes. I'm gonna be straight up with you. I've been sitting here for 10 minutes trying to find the best way to describe why shinies are so sought after, and I am coming up blank. Hundos, that's easy. Better stats mean it's better in PvP. It's better when you fight Pokemon in gyms. It's better when you fight Pokemon in raids. Shinies are just rare. That's literally it. You either care about them or you don't. And I do. The rarity of shinies is all over the place depending on the shiny. There are standard shiny rates for an average Pokemon that you'll find in the wild, but then occasionally you'll have Pokemon that are rarer than that for some reason that isn't fully explained, and then other times you'll have events and they'll have special Pokemon that's like, it's Pikachu, but he's got a cool hat this time, and so now the shiny of that is only available for those 3 days, and there's actually also a Pichu, and that Pichu can be hatched out of a particular egg that you can only get during that 3-day period, and so getting a shiny hat Pichu from that 1 3-day period is like the rarest possible thing you can get. You get the point. It's a big draw for Niantic to get people to pay for the additional stuff in-game during those events, and it works. Now you might be thinking, oh, well, if it can be shiny and if it can be a hundo, can it be both? Yes. What you're thinking of is the elusive shundo. Shundos are pretty much holy grails for most collectors that play very hardcore. I myself have literally 2. I haven't had the best luck with volume, but the 2 that I have are very good, so I'll take it. So, what happened? There is a Pokemon Go content creator who's one of the largest Pokemon Go players in the world, if not the largest, named Fleece King. Fleece King is, I believe, predominantly a Twitch streamer. As I mentioned, I don't watch any Pogo content creators, and that has nothing to do with them. It's just literally my attention span could not watch someone play this game. But as I mentioned, this guy is really big. He was actually the first person to hit level 50, which is the leveling cap in-game in the world. His collection is, I'm sure, immaculate, and he also has sponsorships that go along with the content that he's creating. Now, there's another guy named Master Warlord, who I also did not know of, who is a fairly well-known troll, is my understanding, within the Pogo community. He is someone who is very contentiously pro-spoofing. To explain what spoofing is, remember how I said how I can't move my trainer in the game? The location of my character in the in-game map is dictated by the location of my phone. Where the phone knows it is in coordinates is where I am in-game. Spoofing is pretty simply when you artificially change what your coordinates of your phone are so that your character moves to a different location. Why would someone do this? There's a lot of stuff that you can't do unless you are physically nearby to that thing. So if someone wanted to raid a whole bunch in one day, they could spoof their location to be where all the raids are. This is also very helpful if you don't live near places where lots of raids are happening. Another reason you want to do this is because there are regional Pokemon. So there's some Pokemon that only show up in Asia, in Australia, etc. And so people spoof to get those Pokemon because they're like, well, I'm never going to go to Australia and I don't know anybody who lives there who could trade it to me. So instead of doing it the real way, they spoof their location to go catch that Pokemon. As you can imagine, this is a big violation of the terms of service, and if you get caught doing this, you will get your account suspended and then eventually banned. Now, Master Warlord has a whole bunch of different accounts because as a spoofer, he's getting banned a lot. Apparently, according to him, Fleece King specifically reported him for spoofing at some point and got his latest account either banned or suspended. I don't really recall or care. Because he and Fleece are such big ops to one another, and because he's so annoyed at Niantic because of philosophically disagreeing with them about spoofing, Master Warlord announced that he was going to do something to get back at both of them at the same time. Then the next day, he posted a video of him inside Fleece King's account deleting his shundos. If you delete your Pokemon, Niantic will not bring them back. They're gone. That is well established. They have never done that. He posted the video of him doing this to Twitter with the caption, Why be a king when you can be a god? Niantic, your servers are shit. Fleece King was obviously devastated. He's put a lot of time and effort into this. I've heard that he doesn't have the best past, but regardless of that, I think we can all agree that this was not okay. And I would be really demoralized too. It's a game, sure, but like if you put that much into it, and especially for him when this is his job, people spend a lot of time speculating how this was done. A lot of people think it had to do with the account recovery mechanics that you can get into, though if he had it through his Gmail, there should be two-factor authentication involved, and Warlord claims that he did not actually illegally hack anything, including Gmail. People were blown away by this. Master Warlord's post on this got 3 million views. And of course, people were not amused. This is so fucked. He can't get those back now because Niantic doesn't do that, right? Except they did. Within 1 day, that man had his account and supposedly all of his Pokemon back, which is great. Don't get me wrong, but they have never, as I said, given that courtesy to anyone else. So this now leaves a ton of people like, you could do this the whole time? The whole time? So many people have had problems with hackers over the years and have lost entire accounts because of people stealing them for the money or just out of spite like this guy, and Niantic has never helped. And you can definitely make the argument that this guy, as the most arguably prolific player of Pokemon Go in the world, deserves it if anyone deserves it. But it's leaving a lot of people still feeling pretty icky about the favoritism being shown here, especially because of how self-serving it seems because of how much money he makes for Niantic, both through sponsorships and just general promotion of the game because he's such a public figure. Warlord's posts on Twitter seem to indicate that this might have been the goal to put Niantic in an impossible position because they're damned if they help and damned if they don't help kind of thing. Personally, I think this cosplaying of Robin Hood is a little inauthentic. He was clearly really mad at Fleece King and did this with the intention of hurting Fleece King. Almost everyone who plays has some sort of beef with Niantic. They're not wrong in trying to hold Niantic to task, but like this was not the way. As part of the resolution, we don't know exactly how the account was hacked, which I think is for the best. Though as I mentioned before, there was a statement regarding beefing up the account recovery security, so it may have had something to do with that. Similarly, we don't know the full extent of all the Pokemon that were deleted and recovered. My assumption would be all of the Shundos at least, if not the entire thing, and that they were probably all recovered. If you're gonna do one, you may as well do the whole thing, and I don't think it particularly matters. Fleece King is happy with the result, and so I'm happy for him, truly. I just wish Niantic could get their shit together a bit to help the rest of us when we need help. I've never had this happen to me, just to be clear. I am not that important. I am just a weird lady with too many phones. Hello and welcome back to Niche Tea, where we talk about drama happening in communities you may not be a part of. Last time we talked about the first ever situation in the Pokemon Go community where somebody was hacked and had their Pokemon deleted and Niantic recovered it. I'm turning around today's story a little bit faster than I normally do because it has potentially wider reaching implications than just the immediate community that it's impacted so far. We're talking about Apex Legends. Apex Legends is an electronic arts game, which is a battle royale style first-person shooter. It's a game you play against other people that you meet online, but you can also make your own teams and play those. It's very similar in nature to games like Fortnite, Overwatch, Call of Duty, etc. As with those other games as well, there are people who play a little bit more seriously and they'll build their own teams, practice, and then compete in things like tournaments. One of those tournaments, we'll call it, is put on by Electronic Arts themselves, and it's called the ALGS, the Apex Legends Global Series. The ALGS is a pretty big deal, and the prize pool for this year is $5 million. So, what happened? The regional finals for the 2024 ALGS were yesterday, Sunday the 17th of March. This is esports, so these are live events, and you can watch each player streaming as they're playing. During the North American finals, two very prominent players in the space had cheat modifications turned on out of nowhere while they were playing the game.
Play the game?
Bro, I'm getting hacked.
I know, but can you play it? Can you play it?
Yeah, but it's cheating. The fuck?
No.
Come in. Okay.
Can we shoot height? Can we shoot height?
Yeah, shoot now.
I'm cheating. I'm fucking shit. I have aimbot.
Oh no.
I do feel bad. It's just really funny to watch them be like, ah. Now, you can tell from both these videos, the first guy explicitly says, I've been hacked. I don't know what's going on. And the second guy is very clearly confused. And both of them did leave. Because since this is a team game, and obviously you're in the finals, like they will kick your entire team for cheating. So they left to sacrifice themselves for the team. Now, since this was being watched live, it was clipped immediately and put on Twitter. And the very, very immediate initial response was... pretty quickly believed that these guys were not actually cheating and that they were hacked because the hacker quite literally said, you're being hacked by me. in the chat logs while it's happening. And this person who is allegedly taking credit for this is somebody who is known to have hacked into things in the past as well. But then immediately the question comes up, how did this happen? This is a live major event being held by Electronic Arts, and a guy hacked into it mid-stream into someone else's account while they were actively playing and installed mods. And that brings us to the general problem here, because we don't know. Neither the core Apex team nor EA have made a statement as to what they think happened here. Some people are saying these guys had some sort of cheating thing installed, and that allowed a backdoor for this guy to come in and hack them, even though they weren't using the cheats themselves during the game. Very popular theory right now is that it has something to do with the anti-cheating software that is built into the game. The one EA predominantly uses is called Easy Anti-Cheat. Ironic. Most do seem to agree that this was what's called an RCE, a remote code execution, which, as it sounds, is where someone remotely is able to get into your computer, put code onto it, and execute it. In this case, it would have been cheating software. But if we don't know what the vulnerability was that allowed the remote code execution to happen, then we don't know if it's limited to that type of execution. And if someone was able to do this during what should have been an incredibly secure event, imagine what they could do to the average player. They could install ransomware, they could steal all your shit, they could break into all your accounts, all the shit that we worry about all the time anyway. So at the very least, because we still have no confirmed answer as to how this happened, pretty much everyone is recommending you do not play Apex Legends right now. Some people are uninstalling it, some people are literally formatting their gaming PCs if they can, and resetting all their passwords. But remember how I said some people thought it was related to the Easy Anti-Cheat software that EA uses? If it's a problem with Easy Anti-Cheat, then it's a problem with every game that uses it. That is a shit ton of EA games and more. There is a list on Easy Anti-Cheat's website of every game that they're on, so you can go and check and uninstall those games if you want to be particularly careful. For their part, Easy Anti-Cheat has made an announcement on Twitter that they've been through their systems and they cannot find anything that would indicate any kind of ability for someone to do that through their software. The absolute best part about that being the last time Easy Anti-Cheat made a statement on Twitter, Trump was still in office. This incident brought them out of retirement. Until this can be figured out, EA has announced that they are pausing the ALGS. Hopefully that will be soon. Again, if you or anyone you know plays Apex Legends, please do not log in and consider uninstalling it even. Run some antivirus, I don't know. And if you want to be really careful, go check out the Easy Anti-Cheat website and uninstall any of those games. Please spread the word to your gamer friends on the off chance they haven't seen this yet. I imagine pretty much everyone in the Apex world has, but just to be safe. It just occurred to me this is the second story in a row now about a guy hacking into someone else and fucking their life up just so they can one up a company or something. Can we stop doing that, please? Hello and welcome back to Niche Tea, where we talk about drama happening in communities you may not be a part of. Last time we talked about the Apex Legends Global Series Finals for North America and how some hackers decided that was the perfect time, which it was, to show off some of the security weaknesses within the game. Today we're talking about the archaeology community, and I don't mean fans of archaeology, I mean archaeologists. And it does have to do with publishing again, so if you enjoyed the physics episode, you'll like this one, I think. A lot has happened, so I'm going to take you through the chronological order of information as we received it. The whole story centers on a specific research paper which was published in October of 2023 called Geoarchaeological Prospecting of Gunung Padang Buried His Prehistoric Pyramid in West Java, Indonesia. Gunung Padang is an archaeological site in West Java, Indonesia, which has been studied pretty routinely for the last 40 years or so at least, and was originally discovered as early as 1890 based on the records that it looks like we have. It's described as a series of 5 man-made terraces that go up the side of a hill to the top of it, and that hill used to be a volcano. And in 2014, it was declared a national site area for Indonesia, so there's definitely a lot of research going on there. The article's primary author is an Indonesian geologist, that matters for later, named Danny Hillman Natawidjaya, along with a number of other co-authors who did the research with him and wrote it up with him. However, he is the primary face of this. Now, when this article was originally published, it made a lot of waves in the archaeological community because a lot of people had a lot of feelings about it. Not, from what I understand, with the exact methodology of what he did, his actual methods of dating and digging and taking samples and that type of stuff, but the conclusions that he made from them. Sorry, it started raining. Now, I probably don't have to say this, but I am not an archaeologist or a geologist or anything relevant to this. So if you are and anything I'm about to say is wrong, please, for the love of God, correct me. But I'm going to try and summarize what these key issues archaeologists had with this paperwork. First is that Natawidjaya is claiming that there is literally a pyramid underneath like in the mountain, and that like we're seeing, I guess, the side of it. I think is what he's trying to say, but that there's literally a pyramid in there. The man-made structures do not just live on top of the side of the mountain. They literally go inside the mountain. And then taking that as a preface that he understood to be true, he then dated the stuff around that, like that layer of earth, and found it to be like thousands and thousands of years old. I've heard anywhere from like 10 to 20 or more thousand years old, which would make the oldest pyramid ever made. Like, it's a big deal. For the pyramid piece, he shows different like sections that he took of different parts of the mountain where he did like cut-ins to see what it looked like at different depths. And he shows that pretty far down, there's like vertical stacking of rocks in a way that looks, from his perspective, to be very clearly intentionally laid with what he considers to be mortar in between. So it looks like brickwork almost, but like old school with stones. I'm heavily simplifying this. He also cites evidence he sees of what he considers to be like weathering, you know, like rounding of stones and stuff that would happen from it being outside and getting hit by the elements over time. And he found what he says is a old school like knife made out of stone that indicates, again, like archaeological value, like this is a man-made tool, and he found it, I think, pretty deep in one of the deeper layers. There's more to it, but I'm out of my depth. Those are kind of the key points. He's like, this is a man-made structure. Hello, this is Friday, Caroline, wearing the other dress I got on sale this week. I completely forgot to include why archaeologists disagree with the conclusion that this is a pyramid. And basically it sums up to volcanoes can cause that same type of rock stacking. In addition to the other things pointed out by Natawajaya, they disagree that any of this is evidence of anything artificially man-made and that it's just a reflection of it being a volcano. So then taking that as a premise, he moves on to dating. The way this is done in archaeology is via a method called carbon dating. Carbon dating, put too simply, is you take a section of material, and it should be ideally like a mixed section. It should have like bone and, you know, soil and other stuff in there. And then for all of the different stuff in there, you measure the amount of certain carbon isotopes present in them. And basically that can tell you how old it is because we know how much that decays over time. The reason you want a cross section is because shit gets mixed up down there. We think it just like goes down flat and like it's like this. It's not. Shit, it moves all kinds of around. So if you pull a bunch of different stuff, especially different types of materials, and they all come back with fairly similar carbon dating, then you can feel much more confident about that result. Whereas if it's more homogeneous, you're far more likely to just hit a patch of something that was like from another time that just kind of moved up this way and you accidentally hit it and then you have the wrong date. So my understanding, and again, not a professional, is that the problem with what Natawajaya did is that he took a bunch of, did like columns, like you take like a circular thing and put it all the way down into the ground, pull the whole cross section up, and then pick out sections and say like, this is this many meters down and let's carbon date this, and then the same thing down. But everything they came up was very homogeneous, and my understanding is mostly soil. Soil is, to my understanding, the worst thing to carbon date in terms of reliability. But also, going into the dating, as I mentioned, he takes as a premise that this was a man-made structure in this place. He thinks he's already proven that. But from an archaeological standpoint, they're looking at them totally separately. They're like, okay, you think you proved there was a pyramid here. We don't necessarily agree. But then when you go to the carbon dating, we have to go from like a blank slate, and we don't see any what's called context in these samples. Meaning there's no indication in the samples by themselves that there was any humans around during these times. So like, even if your carbon dating is accurate, who cares? There's no bones, there's no like fragments of stuff. They got one knife. It wasn't his carbon dating samples. And there were also allegedly things found during the digs that don't align with the conclusions made in the paper. For example, a coin that very clearly came from the 1800s was allegedly like 11 meters down, but he just didn't include that in the paper, apparently. Lots of archaeologists have gone into detail talking about why this never should have been published and breaking it down much more thoroughly and accurately than I just did, I'm sure. One I particularly recommend that I enjoyed was a YouTube video by Archaeology by Flint Dibble. Dr. Dibble has a series where he pretty much does peer reviews of paper on video, so you can just see them go through it. In this one, he brings in Indonesian archaeological specialists. Remember, Natawajaya is a geologist, not an archaeologist. They talk about everything I just talked about. Also, the fact that that knife, apparently, they don't believe that that was a knife. They literally think it's just a rock. It doesn't look at all like any of the knives that actually existed at the time. Also, like, can we define what a pyramid is to start? Like, this doesn't look like a pyramid. Even a step pyramid, it doesn't match that at all. And even to start off, the two Indonesian archaeologists are just like, yeah, we don't have pyramids. Anyway, real late. So what happened? The larger archaeology community has basically been ringing alarm bells on this for months, and finally last Friday, Wiley, the publisher of the paper, put out a retraction on it. Now retractions happen, but this was a particularly big deal because when this was published, it went everywhere. Before this, the oldest pyramids known to man were right around 5,000 years old. This thing is saying at least double that, up to like 30,000 years old, and in a totally different region. This news spread like wildfire, the media picked it up, people are talking about it left and right, it got a Netflix special. So a lot of archaeologists now are like, cool, for the retraction, can you please be louder about it? There is a ton of misinformation that's still out there, and this retraction isn't making nearly the waves that the actual publishing did. And then earlier today, the 21st, Natawajaya put out a basically response to the whole thing, saying that he and all the other authors fully disagree with the retraction. And the really interesting thing is that he also posted, supposedly, all of the email exchanges between him and the representative at Wiley who was talking to him about the fact that it was being reviewed for retraction. This email chain is insane. It starts at the beginning of December. Wiley reaches out and is like, hey, Queen, we got problem. Natawajaya is like, is this an ethical concern? And Wiley's like, no, it's not about that. We just, we need to go back over. We've got these criticisms coming in and they seem pretty well founded. Natawajaya is like, we went through a 9-month review process. What? Why is this coming up now? Fair, to be honest. Wiley is the biggest idiot in this. What are y'all doing over there? They then go back and forth for the next month with Wiley saying that they need responses to the critiques and Natawajaya saying, we need more specific critiques. I don't understand what the specific problem is. I'll agree that what Wiley allegedly sent through to him didn't seem super helpful from like a critique response standpoint. It was basically like, this is bad. But I know he's seen the commentary from the rest of the community, so he's got the detail he needs. If I can like 1/10 of the way understand what they're talking about, he can understand it enough to summarize what those issues are and respond to them back to Wiley. He responds basically reaffirming what they've already provided and saying that their methods were good, etc., etc. But again, it doesn't really speak to the conclusions you made coming out of that. As you are aware, Wiley disagreed and retracted. Wiley flat out admits that they didn't have the right people peer review it and that if they had, they wouldn't have published it, which makes them yet again the worst people in this story. Go read the emails, by the way. Watching them escalate is so funny. By the end, they're like, hello, thank you so much for responding. Go fuck yourself. And now Natawajaya has pivoted to saying that he is being suppressed because the archaeology mafia doesn't like his findings or something. And the last sentence Natawajaya said to Wiley is the most memeable thing I've ever read. This whole thing was a treat.